Page 21. And this I thought was, yeah, I really liked this part. And I felt in this a cosmic injustice, a profound cruelty, which infused an abiding, irrepressible desire to unshackle my body and achieve the velocity of escape. Do you ever feel that same need? Your life is so very different from my own. The grandness of the world, the real world, the whole world is a known thing for you. And you have no need of dispatches because you have seen so much of the American galaxy and its inhabitants, their homes, their hobbies up close. I don't know what it means to grow up with a black president, social networks, omnipresent media, and black women everywhere in their natural hair. What I know is that when they loosed the killer of Michael Brown, you said, "I've got to go." And that cut me because for all our differing worlds at your age, my feeling was exactly the same. And there's one other, 113. I really wish this was a discussion with all of us. It would be nice to sit in a circle and talk about this. And Eddie has just joined me. But yeah, it's nice to know that you guys are here though. Oh no, I'm taking off some of the page. Sorry, I'm trying to find the moment. So it's about the mother of this murdered black boy was then taking her case before journalists and writers. We met her in the lobby of the Times Square Hotel. She was medium height with brown skin and hair down to her shoulders. It had not even been a week since the verdict, but she was composed and wholly self-possessed. She did not rage at the killer, but wondered aloud if the rules she imparted had been enough. She had wanted her son to stand for what he believed and to be respected, and he had died for believing his friends had the right to play their music loud, to be American teenagers. Still, she was left wondering. In my mind, I keep saying, had he not spoke up, would he still be here? She would not forget the uniqueness of her son, his singular life. She would not forget that he had a father who loved him, who took him in when she battled cancer. She would not forget that he was the life of the party, that he always had new friends for her to shuttle around in her minivan, and she would have had him live on in her work. I told her the verdict angered me. She told me that the idea that someone on that jury thought it plausible there was a gun in the car baffled the mind. She had said that she was baffled too, and that I should not mistake her calm probing for the absence of anger. Then the mother of the murdered boy rose, turned to you, and said, "You exist, you matter, you have value. You have every right to wear your hoodie, to play your music as loud as you want. You have every right to be you, and no one should deter you from being you. You have to be you, and you can never be afraid to be you." Imagine having to tell a teenager that it's okay to wear a hoodie or listen to their music loudly. What is Eddie doing? Eddie was using her litter, so I apologize for that. An unfortunate timing. Thanks, Eddie. But I get to share my office with her toilet. This is the way of the world in my house. So there you go. I'm going to do another question. This is Jules Bennett, 22, asked, I wonder if racism is improving with each generation, or if it's more about the environment his parents were able to offer him, talking about Ta-Nehisi's son. And I picked out a few passages that I thought dealt with this, because, you know, a lot of people are talking about the construct of race and what is race. It's literally a difference between pigment in your skin. It doesn't really exist unless we enforce it, and we have created this idea of one race, another race. I mean, we're all human beings. It's not actually a thing unless it's created and used. You know, how many different types of black people, how many different types of white people, how many different types of Asian people. It's like the differences are minuscule, and yet there's so many different people across all over the world. And I don't know that racism is getting any less, but I think it's changing. And I think we have to be really careful when we say, oh, well, it's getting better generation after generation. I think it's becoming less obvious. But I think, and I could be wrong, I'm just a person having thoughts, but it seems to me that it's mutates, and that it goes from being overt and people are comfortable with it to then becoming subverted, and it becomes about this systemic idea and why, you know, instead of enslavement we have imprisonment. I mean, the amount of bodies, human bodies, that are locked away for life, that are forced to work. It's not slave labor, it's incarcerated labor. Is it any different? Should you go to jail because you know, ran through a stoplight and then can't afford to pay your ticket? And then because you can't afford to pay your ticket, you get an extra fine on top of that ticket. And then because you can't afford to pay that, you get sent to jail. Because this is what's happening in the world. And it's not just like murderers and rapists that go to jail. It's people who just can't simply afford to not pay their bail, or to not pay a ticket, a parking ticket or a driving ticket. That's crazy to me. And the amount of companies, big corporations, that are making money off this incarcerated labor. And I think this is where all of us have a part to play, because as we're discovering, it's not okay just to say, I'm not a racist or I'm an ally. It's like, well, what are we going to do? Well, what we have to do is we have to educate ourselves. We have to discover, okay, well, what are these companies that are using the incarcerated labor that they are getting for nothing, and the profits they are making off these people's lives being incarcerated for next to nothing? Then we should not buy from those companies. We should hold those companies accountable. We have to vote. We have to vote in local elections. We have to vote and make sure that the people representing us, whether it's in your local community board or whatever it is, that they represent the highest ideals of humanity. And I really don't think this is a political statement. And I hate that here in Ireland, in America, you know, that politics has become this or that, either or, black or white, you know, Republican, Democrats, conservative, Labour. We have to forget that. We have to strive to be the best of humanity and elect people who are going to do that. We also should get as much money out of politics as possible, because when there's money in politics, that's where the corruption is. Anyway, I digress. Sorry, I was going to read some more. I also want to just speak to the beauty of his writing and his prose and the way he constructs the most incredibly beautiful sentences. It was a pleasure, even though it was harrowing reading this. It was also a pleasure to read his language, and to hear his voice through his words was quite beautiful. But just talking about this idea of race and has race changed or whatever. So where do I want to start this? I took a survey of Europe post-1800. I saw black people rendered through white eyes, unlike any I'd seen before. The black people looked regal and human. I remembered the soft face of Alessandro de' Medici, the royal bearing the Boche black magic. These images, cast in the 16th and 17th centuries, were contrasted with those created after enslavement. The Sambo caricatures I had always known. What was the difference? In my survey course of America, I'd seen portraits of the Irish drawn in the same ravenous, lustful and simian way. Perhaps there had been other bodies, mocked, terrorized and insecure. Perhaps the Irish too had once lost their bodies. Perhaps being named black had nothing to do with any of this. Perhaps being named black was just someone's name for being at the bottom. A human turned to object. Object turned to pariah. And I think this is, there's other parts I want to read on this, but I think this is what, we all have to realize, is that this idea of othering generally is just about putting someone below you. And Toni Morrison talks about, what are you without your race? And I am going to paraphrase, but she said, what are you if I take your race away from you? Are you any good? Are you strong? Are you tall? Are you intelligent? And I think that's what we all have to realize, is that, this idea of, when you see these people shouting, we have them here, the English Defence League, and when you see these right-wing neo-Nazis or Nazis, it's like, what are you? What is it that, have you so little in your soul and so little in yourself that it's the pigment of your skin that makes you special? That's really sad. And yeah, I'm going to read some more, because I can't say anything as well as he does. So this is where he talks a little bit more about this idea. The two great divisions of society are not the rich and the poor, but the white and black, said the South Carolina Senator John C. Calhoun. And all the former, the poor as well as the rich, belong to the upper class and are respected and treated as equals. And there it is. The right to break the black body as the meaning of their sacred equality. And that right has always given them meaning, has always meant that there was someone down in the valley, because a mountain is not a mountain if there is nothing below. You and I, my son, are that below. That was true in 1776. It is true today. And there is no them without you. And without the right to break you, they must necessarily fall from the mountain, lose their divinity, and tumble out of the dream. And then they would have to determine how to build their suburbs on something other than human bones, how to angle their jails towards something other than a human stockyard, how to erect a democracy independent of cannibalism. But because they believe themselves to be white, they would rather countenance a man choked to death on film under their laws. And they would rather subscribe to the myth of Trayvon Martin, slight teenager, hands full of candy and soft drinks, transforming into a murderous juggernaut. and they would rather see Prince Jones followed by a bad cop through 3 jurisdictions and shot down for acting like a human. And they would rather teach out in all their sanity and push my 4-year-old son as though he was merely an obstacle in the path of their too important day. And then there's also this is also something I wanted to highlight. The fact is that despite their dreams, their lives are also not inviolable. When their own vulnerability becomes real, when the police decide that tactics intended for the ghetto should enjoy wider usage, when their armed society shoots down their children, when nature sends hurricanes against their cities, they are shocked in a way that those of us who were born and bred to understand cause and effect can never be. I think there's one more bit that I wanted to. It's more about sort of this idea of the dream. And this is about Dr. Jones. And she could not lean on her country for help. When it came to her son, Dr. Jones's country did what it does best. It forgot him. The forgetting is habit. It is yet another necessary component of the dream. They've forgotten the scale of theft that enriched them in slavery, the terror that allowed them for a century to pilfer the vote, the segregationist policy that gave them their suburbs. They have forgotten because to remember would tumble them out of the beautiful dream and force them to live down here with us, down here in the world. I am convinced that the dreamers, at least the dreamers of today, would rather live white than live free. In the dream, they are Buck Rogers, Prince Aragon, an entire race of Skywalkers. To awaken them is to reveal that they are an empire of humans, and like all humans, and like all empires of humans, are built on the destruction of the body. It is to stain their nobility, to make them vulnerable, fallible, breakable humans. You know, there's so much more in this book. I've gone back in and out of it so many times. I mean, there's passages here that just shake you. You know, it's stuff that you think you know, and it's stuff that you think, oh well, I can imagine what that must be like, and then you really spend time and this is, never forget that we were enslaved in this country longer than we have been free. Never forget that for 250 years, Black people were born into chains, whole generations followed by more generations who knew nothing but chains. I mean, if you believe in psychology of people, of groups of people who've endured trauma, and how long that must take to overcome that. I mean, the fact that there are some people in America who don't believe that that this is a real thing, that this is a real issue that needs to be dealt with. But I know somebody's saying racism is prevalent in every country. It's very true. It is very true. And this is, I think, it's also about classism. And that's also one thing that I wanted to sort of talk about as well, because, you know, it's that whole thing of we always feel like we have to have some people down here so we can have other people up here. And that's prevalent, I think, in every country, in every place. And it's not, you know, I really don't want to be bashing on America. It's just, given what had been happening in the last couple of months, I wanted to pick an American author. And And I know some of you have said that this is a very singularly male point of view. And he's only speaking from his own experience in a very personal way to his son. And he says it himself, he says it in the book. Well, I'm aware that the destruction or the plunder of a black male body is not the same, or not to the same extent of the destruction and plunder that has happened to female black bodies in America. And he talks about how his mother, his wife, partner, educated him about that. But as you all know, I try to do a male author, then a female author, male author, female author. So that's why I would. Sorry, I'm seeing some questions. A lot of you saying there's a lot about classism. It's really hard to have a one-sided conversation about this because I feel like, I'm in some ways, I hope I'm preaching to the choir, because I firmly believe that, anyone who's reading this book can have the empathy and the understanding of what that experience must be. And I feel like if you're part of my book club, then you're definitely of that idea. Someone's like, girl, woman, other. Yeah. I have bought that and I'm starting it. This week I had another book to read for work purposes, but hold on, right, I'm going to answer some questions from here, and then I have another one from here. Due to the present day, this book was... Stop moving on me. This book was chosen. Racism is something cultural all over the world. How should white people help to fight it? Well, I think it's, it's a every single day you have to make sure that you're not just not doing something, but not ignoring the problem. And I think that that's something we've all learned, is that it's not enough just to be like, well, I don't do any racist acts. I'm not. I think we have to make sure that we are holding ourselves as a society to account. And everyone talks about my industry and the industry I'm in, and that's a huge thing that I'm hugely aware of, is how vast the problem is in the entertainment industry. And that is about how many voices other than this, very typical white privileged voice and stories are being told. And it's like, well, how do we encourage more people to get their stories told in the industry? How do we encourage, we've been having these conversations behind the scenes on Outlander. It's like, well, how do we get more people behind the scenes, whether it's on our crew, in our, writing rooms, or in our camera departments? We really had done so much work on making sure there was, so many women getting involved. But it's like, okay, well, are we including all women? Or are we just making this a white women thing? And that's not okay. So it's about every single day. I mean, I think every one of us has to look at our lives and our jobs, our schools, whatever it is, whatever our environment is, and are we being inclusive? Are we being respectful? Are we holding up other people? Are we judging? Are we... I don't know. I think the steps are easier than we think. And I think it's about not being blind and not living in the dream, as he speaks about, and not being blindfolded to the experience of so many other people. And it's also, I think there's a great piece towards the end, and I hope I have yes, this ties in with what you all know is another very sort of passionate subject of mine, which is the environment, because environmental causes do not affect everybody equally. And we know that global warming and climate change is going to affect the developing world probably worse in the beginning, that most, communities who are not as well off are living in areas that are more prone to flooding, more prone to drought. Most communities that are not as well off are living in the areas that have the worst air quality. So this is also where we have power and where we have an ability to make changes, that if we all do things, we can make this slightly better. And he talks about once the dream's parameters were caged by technology and by the limits of horsepower and wind, but the dreamers have improved themselves, and the damming of seas for voltage, the extraction of coal, the transmuting of oil into food have enabled an expansion in plunder with no known precedent. And this revolution has freed the dreamers to plunder not just the bodies of humans, but the body of the earth itself. The earth is not our creation. It has no respect for us. It has no use for us. And its vengeance is not the fire in the cities, but the fire in the sky. Something more fierce than Marvis Garvey is riding on the whirlwind. Something more awful than all our African ancestors is rising with the seas. The two phenomena are known to each other. It was the cotton that passed through our chained hands that inaugurated this age. It is the flight from us that sent them sprawling into the subdivided woods, and the methods of transport through these new subdivisions across the sprawl is the automobile, the noose around the neck of the earth, and ultimately the dreamers themselves. And I think about this in terms of what we can do. And, I grew up in Europe, in Ireland, and I think about our responsibility in terms of how we've all become addicted to convenience, and we've become addicted to these systems that are so unjust and unfairly affect people around the world who did not grow up as privileged as we did. And it all intersects. I think I've one last question. I was going to do that one, but I think I'll go to here. I'm very grateful that you all came and joined me for this. This is it's been a really, and I'm back. It's been a really tough, I think, couple of months for everybody. Not just with coronavirus, but I think seeing the pain that so many people are experiencing, and I hope that it's a turning point for everyone across the world. This is not a uniquely American issue. I've been looking at this great Instagram page, Black and Irish, and realizing how many issues are in my own country. I've been trying to learn as much as I can about the issues here in Scotland and in the UK. And I think that's what we all have to do. We really have to educate ourselves to what's going on, and hope that as a society that we can come out of this in a better way, because it's not felt great of late. And I think every one of us have a responsibility to try and make that better. Okay, let's find so bad at this. notes. Lots of lovely comments. I'm trying to see if there's a question. Okay. What made me choose this book? Okay. I have read a couple of, and I probably am butchering his name, which is the worst. Ta-Nehisi's essays. I read a few in the New Yorker, and I had wanted to read this book. I hadn't, but he was an author that I was familiar with. He is somebody that I had seen speak before on, I can't remember which TV show it was, but I just really liked his voice in terms of how he wrote in the essays that I had read, and I had wanted to pick a male author. And I kind of toyed around with the idea if I would go with someone like James Baldwin or someone, someone from the 60s. But I wanted to, I know this book was written in 2015, but I wanted it to be more current. And I liked the link between the Ocean's book and this book, and so that's why I chose it. And I'm sorry, because I know a lot of people had a hard time getting the book sent to them, because I guess a lot of people are reading it right now, which actually makes me very happy. Right now, I don't have a physical copy of my next book, and I'm going to forget. Oh God, I'm a disaster today. I don't have a copy because I have ordered so many books of late, and I sort of thought I was going to choose a different book, and then I wanted to go somewhere else in the world, because the book that I originally was going to pick is actually by a UK author, and I thought, well, we've already done that. That's really irritating me that I've so Arundhati Roy is the next author, and it's not The God of Small Things. It's her newest book, and for some reason I'm totally blanking on its name, but I'm going to post a picture of it. And I wanted to go to India for a couple of reasons. I wanted a little bit of a different journey. The God of Small Things was one of my favorite books many, many years ago. And so I decided to pick her and pick this new book because I've been wanting to read it for a while too. And I also wanted to go to another country where this idea of classism and othering happens within one supposed race, right? And so I just thought that it would be a good choice, and I'm so annoyed that I'm hoping someone's just gonna type in the name for me so I can say it out loud. If anyone wants to do that, right now, you would save me. A washing machine? No, not washing machine. Anyway, I will post it. But no, oh, you're talking about the noise. No, it's the boiler. I have the worst office in the world. It's got the boiler and the cat toilet, and yeah. All right, so I guess on that note, I will say a huge thank you to everyone for joining. I hope this was a nice little chat with everyone. It's been, I think, a really important time for all of us to do our best to read, explore, and educate ourselves so that we can use this moment as a really positive, world-changing movement that we can all be proud of. So it is the ministry of the utmost happiness. Thank you. Somebody got in there. The ministry of utmost happiness. Arundhati Roy. All right. Thank you, everyone. Mwah.